When someone has an avoidant attachment style, it's not that they don't want connection. It's that connection, especially emotional intimacy, feels threatening to them. To most people, getting close to someone feels good. It feels like home. But for the avoidant, closeness triggers a kind of internal alarm. That alarm says, you're losing control, or you're going to get hurt. So what do? They put up walls. They withdraw. They create distance. Not because they don't care, but because caring too much feels dangerous. It's easy to take this behavior personally, especially if you're on the receiving end. You show up with your heart open, you offer consistency, you make room for emotional depth, and they respond by shutting down or pulling away. It feels like rejection, like indifference, but in many cases, it's self-protection. People with avoidant tendencies have often learned, consciously or not, that getting close means being vulnerable, and vulnerability means risk. Maybe they grew up in environments where emotions weren't safe, or they had experiences that taught them love comes with strings attached, expectations, or even betrayal. So now, as adults, they manage that fear by keeping people at a distance. What's confusing is that avoidants still crave love. They want someone to see them, to understand them, to accept them, but they fear what happens when someone actually does. That fear can be subtle. It shows up in indecision, mixed signals, emotional unavailability, or the classic, "I'm not ready for something serious" line. Sometimes they'll even initiate intense connections, but suddenly pull away once they feel things getting real. That's the push-pull dynamic that so many people find themselves trapped in. You might be tempted to try harder, to prove that you're safe, that you're not like the people who hurt them in the past. And while your compassion is noble, it's not your job to rescue someone from their own emotional patterns, especially if doing so keeps you stuck in a cycle of anxiety and unmet needs. Understanding that avoidant behavior comes from fear, not lack of interest, can help you detach with clarity instead of confusion. It reminds you that their withdrawal isn't always about your worth, but about their wound. But even if you have empathy for them, you can't sacrifice your emotional well-being just to soothe theirs. Because if someone is constantly trying to regulate their anxiety by avoiding closeness, they'll never create the space where real love can actually grow. At some point, they have to confront that fear on their own terms. No amount of patience, reassurance, or proving yourself will take that step for them. Until they do, they will continue to mistake distance for safety and push away the very thing they want most: genuine, healthy connection. And that's why, no matter how much you care, you need to recognize the difference between someone who is unavailable and someone who is truly ready. When someone with an avoidant attachment style finally finds themselves alone, away from the person they pushed away, the silence can start to feel louder than they expected. In the moment, distance feels like relief. It feels like control, like freedom. They've convinced themselves that creating space was the right move, that it protected them, preserved their identity, kept things from getting too complicated. But over time, that space stops feeling like peace and starts to feel like emptiness. What they don't always anticipate is that the person they pushed away doesn't just disappear from their mind. You linger. Not in a desperate, haunting kind of way, but in the quiet moments, the pause before sleep, the walk home from work, the song that reminds them of that one night with you. You're there, not physically, but emotionally. You're a memory that carries weight, and the deeper the connection was, the heavier that weight becomes. Avoidants aren't immune to feelings. They're just good at compartmentalizing them. They put emotions in boxes, store them away, tell themselves a story that helps them feel justified in their detachment. But eventually, those stories start to fall apart. They begin to realize that you weren't just someone in their life. You were someone who saw them in a way they rarely allow. You saw past the surface. You saw the vulnerable parts they tried to hide. And that kind of being seen doesn't fade quietly. They start to remember not just the facts, where you went, what you did, but the feeling. The way you looked at them without judgment. The way your presence felt calming, safe, grounded. The way you challenged them to show up emotionally, even when it scared them. And that memory becomes harder to escape. Not because they want to obsess over you, but because it represents something they now realize they might not find again so easily. They may try to distract themselves with work, with flings, with social media scrolls and weekend plans. But even in all that noise, your absence has a presence. And that's the paradox they face. They chose space, yet space is where they feel you the most. Not in the arguments, not in the uncertainty, but in the stillness where connection used to live. This isn't about them suddenly becoming ready for love just because they miss you. Missing you doesn't automatically equal growth, but the memory of you starts to become a mirror. It reflects back not only what they had, but also who they were with you, and who they weren't able to be. That gap, that missed opportunity, begins to weigh on them in ways they didn't expect. And sometimes it's only in your absence that they begin to see the full value of your presence. Not just what you gave, but how rare it was to feel that known, that understood, even for a moment. When someone with an avoidant attachment style starts to miss you, they may reach out, but not always for the reasons you hope. It's easy to interpret that late night message, that sudden check in, or that seemingly heartfelt, "I've been thinking about you," as a sign that they've changed, that they've realized your worth, grown from the distance, and are now ready to come back and do things right. But more often than not, that's not what's happening. Avoidants don't usually process emotions in real time. They push things down, distract themselves, and create mental narratives that help them avoid vulnerability. But over time, the space they created starts to feel cold and disconnected. What once felt like freedom now feels like a void. And that void is where the memory of you becomes impossible to ignore. It's not that they suddenly had a transformation and are emotionally ready for real intimacy. It's that the discomfort of your absence has finally become louder than the fear of closeness. So they reach out. And that moment can feel so powerful. You might feel validated, seen, even a little hopeful. After all, you wanted them to miss you. You wanted them to understand what they lost. But here's the critical distinction: reaching out because they miss the comfort of you is not the same as reaching out because they're prepared to love you the way you deserve. In many cases, the reach out is more about them than it is about you. It's a way for them to soothe their own discomfort, to test whether the door is still open, to see if you're still emotionally available without having to fully commit. It's reassurance without responsibility. They don't always realize they're doing this. It's not always manipulative or malicious, but it is driven by avoidance, by fear, and by the emotional tug of war they've been playing internally. And if you respond, especially if you respond with warmth, openness, and emotional availability, it can give them just enough comfort to feel better and then retreat again. It reinforces the pattern. They reach out, you engage, they feel momentarily safe, and then they pull back before things get too real again. That cycle can be exhausting. It keeps you stuck in a state of emotional limbo, always wondering if this time will be different. This is why discernment is everything. You need to ask yourself, are they reaching out because they've truly faced their fear of intimacy and done the work to be emotionally present? Or are they reaching out because they're lonely, nostalgic, or uncomfortable being with their own thoughts? Your heart may want to respond with hope, but your self-worth must respond with clarity. Because unless they are showing a consistent, grounded shift in their actions, not just words, it's likely that their reach out is not a sign of readiness. It's a sign that they're haunted by what they ran from. And that's not love. That's a longing for relief from their own emotional dissonance. Being missed and being loved are not the same thing, and mistaking one for the other can keep you stuck in a cycle of false hope. When someone with an avoidant attachment style starts thinking about you, reminiscing about your presence, or even reaching out, it can feel like proof that they love you. It feels emotionally validating, like all the effort you gave, all the patience you extended, all the waiting you endured finally meant something. But longing is not the same as commitment. Regret is not the same as readiness. Missing you doesn't automatically mean they are capable of showing up in a real, consistent, emotionally present way. An avoidant person may absolutely miss your energy, your softness, your loyalty, and the way you made them feel seen. But love is more than memory. It's more than desire. It's more than romanticized flashbacks of shared laughter or the sound of your voice. Love, real, sustainable love, requires presence. It demands vulnerability, openness, effort, and the willingness to lean in when things get hard. Avoidants often fall in love with the idea of you, the safety, the care, the warmth. But when faced with the reality of emotional closeness, they instinctively recoil. That doesn't mean the connection wasn't real. It just means they weren't equipped to hold it. When you confuse being missed for being loved, you start making decisions based on emotion rather than reality. You tell yourself, they wouldn't think about me if they didn't love me, or they wouldn't have reached out if I didn't mean something. But those thoughts can be traps. They lure you back into old patterns, where you're constantly proving your value to someone who's unsure if they're ready to meet you at your level. They create a dynamic where your self-worth becomes tied to someone else's confusion, and that's not a place you want to live. Being loved means being chosen, not just once in a fleeting emotional moment, but again and again, even when it's uncomfortable. Love shows itself through consistency, through accountability, through growth. It doesn't hide behind silence or only show up when it's convenient. It doesn't treat you like an option while expecting the benefits of your emotional availability. Missing you might mean they regret how things ended. It might mean they feel your absence. But if they haven't changed their behavior, confronted their fears, or done any internal work, their feelings are just echoes, not actions. You deserve more than someone who misses you when it's quiet. You deserve someone who chooses you when it's hard. Someone who doesn't just remember your value in hindsight, but recognizes it in real time. And if the only evidence of their love is the fact that they miss you, that's not love you can build a life on. That's not love that sustains you. That's love that flickers when it should be burning steady. There comes a point where you have to stop asking what someone else feels and start asking what you deserve. When you've given someone your time, your emotional energy, your care, and all they've offered in return are breadcrumbs, you need to pause and recognize the pattern. An avoidant person, especially one who hasn't done any deep work on themselves, will often give just enough to keep you holding on. A message here, a compliment there, a sudden burst of attention when they feel you pulling away. But these moments are rarely rooted in true emotional presence. They're usually just enough to reset your hope, to keep you emotionally tethered while they continue avoiding true intimacy. Breadcrumbs look like effort, but they're really a distraction. They keep you stuck in the potential of the relationship rather than the reality. You tell yourself, well, they reached out again, or they said they miss me, or they opened up just a little bit. That must mean they're changing. And maybe it does mean they're starting to feel something. But feeling isn't the same as showing up. And your emotional energy is too valuable to be spent on someone who's still deciding whether they're ready to treat you with the depth and consistency you offer. The strength you need isn't in being more patient. It's in being honest with yourself. Ask, am I being loved fully here? Am I getting the kind of emotional security I need? If the answer is no, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. But it does mean you need to choose yourself. Because if someone can't or won't meet you in the space of real connection, not surface-level affection or fleeting attraction, then no matter how much they claim to care, they're not ready for you. Real connection isn't supposed to feel like chasing. It's not supposed to be anxiety wrapped in hope. It's supposed to feel grounding, mutual, and steady. That doesn't mean it's perfect or always easy, but it does mean there's a basic level of emotional safety, trust, and clarity. You're not left guessing. You're not constantly decoding mixed signals or trying to manage someone else's fear of closeness. Choosing yourself doesn't mean closing your heart. It means refusing to abandon yourself in the hope that someone else will one day be ready. It means recognizing that you are not here to convince someone to love you the way you deserve. You are here to align with someone who already does. Someone who sees your value not as a nice to have, but as a gift they want to protect, honor, and invest in. So when an avoidant misses you but can't show up for you, let that be your clarity. Let it remind you that your love isn't something to be rationed or earned. It's something to be reciprocated. And the moment you stop accepting crumbs, you start creating space for the kind of love that feeds you fully. In the end, understanding the avoidant struggle isn't about making excuses for their distance. It's about recognizing the truth behind their behavior and, most importantly, protecting your own heart. When someone can't escape the thought of you, it shows that you matter deeply, but it also reveals where they are on their journey with themselves. And no matter how much someone thinks about you, the love you deserve comes from someone who chooses you wholeheartedly, not someone who's still afraid to be close. Remember, your worth isn't tied to someone else's fears or hesitation. You deserve a love that welcomes you fully, consistently, and without apology. So hold on to your strength, honor your boundaries, and never settle for less than the genuine connection you're capable of giving and receiving. Thank you for being here and allowing yourself to explore this complicated but important topic. I hope this gives you clarity, courage, and confidence in your relationships moving forward. Take care of yourself and remember, the right love is never one you have to chase. Thank you. And I wish you all the best on your journey.